Welcome to the Success Talk Show, the podcast for ambitious leaders who want to get their best results and create a workplace for their teams to thrive. Each week, we share practical advice to help you accelerate your success and grow as an inspiring leader. Now, here's your host, Leadership Success Coach, Donna Sirianni.
Welcome to another episode of the Success Talk Show. This is Donna Sirianni, and our special guest today is Allison Perkel. And Allison is the Senior Director for the Engineering Function at Carbon Black, the leading provider of next-generation endpoint security. They've got more than 2,500 customers, including 30 of the Fortune 100, with services ranging from replacing legacy antivirus solutions to protecting endpoints from the most advanced cyber attacks. Allison has a master's degree in artificial intelligence and has held leadership roles in engineering at several companies, including iRobot and CloudTree. And I love the summary on Allison's LinkedIn profile: delivering product to market, having fun, and changing the world. I think that says a lot. So Allison, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So great. So the landscapers showed up right now below the window. Good timing. Don't they know it's the day before a holiday? They should be taking a break. So Allison, the first question I'm dying to ask you is, I know from our conversation that you're passionate about creating an environment for your team to thrive. So what can you share with us about your strategies for accomplishing this?
Sure. And it's funny, I said landscapers at my house a couple of days ago, so I'm right there with you on that one.
They must have a copy of my calendar. They know exactly when to show up.
They're good like that. So for me, one of the biggest things I can do is create an environment of trust. And when you start having a good time, start having trust, that's when magic happens. Now, to get there takes a lot of different pieces. One is you got to make sure folks realize that they don't have to be right. They don't have to hide things, that they can talk about what's actually happening, which means that you, as a leader, need to also understand what they're doing. Get your hands dirty, roll your sleeves up a little bit, get in there, listen to what the folks are saying, make sure you understand it, and then act on it. Once folks see that you're beginning to remove impediments or that you're willing to do whatever it takes to help get a ball rolling, whether it's, hey, you guys are here late, let me order some pizzas, or I can verify that, let me jump in there. You begin to create this environment where folks, A, begin to trust you, begin to trust your words, and then they're, oh, well, maybe I can actually say this. Maybe I can actually do this. Maybe I can actually begin to work in that way. But really, sometimes just listening really is the first, actually, it is always the first step you have to do.
And so what are some of the challenges? Because I love what you're saying, Allison, because people, sometimes organizations, environments, they say, oh, we want to encourage innovation, which means taking risks. And they say it, but their actions don't support it. Because the minute something goes wrong, they're finger pointing, looking for somebody to blame. And so I'm curious how what's been your approach for really addressing that head on?
Totally. That's actually a really good point. So the first step is I try and make sure I have that buy-in from above that we're not going to do that. Folks need the ability to be wrong. They need the ability to fail fast. It's an overused term, so I want to dissect that one a little bit. Many years ago, I went into a company and I was doing a backdoor on a boss, and the comment was, XYZ is right, even when he should be wrong. Didn't understand that at the time. What it really means is that you have to trust the people who you work with, who work for you and work above you, which means that you may think that they're doing something completely wrong. You may think that they're going to make the biggest flop, but you know what? It's their call. You support them. You back them. And if they do happen to flop, you personally cannot be the one finger pointing. You personally have to be the one helping them figure out, hey, well, let's talk about what happened. Let's kind of go through these steps and let's learn from this. But you need the organization behind you to also back that up. At the end of the day, you can be that person. So I found that in my career, I'm that person who will help fix them up, dust them off, or holy cats, that was awesome. And instead I'm going, I can't believe that worked. Oh my God. But you got to have that ability to show that. And then when you work up, I try and form that buffer. So if I know folks would do that, well, the upper level management doesn't have to know the nitty gritty. They can either cast the blame to me. Great. It stops my folks they learned a lesson, move forward, and I'm just adding a buffer there so they don't get berated, or I can make sure the phrase passes through and that folks see that, hey, this was noticed up there. And that again begins to change the culture on a team if it was not there already. Because now they're saying, hey, I'm getting the praise when things go right, and I'm not getting people yelling at me when things go south because of a call I made. So that's kind of like how I look at the role there. And that takes time to get both the confidence of folks to believe that, hey, I'm really not going to point fingers at you. You need a few examples of that. So I do try and force some of those, like look for easy things that don't have too much impact to kind of get that ball rolling.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, because the minute you reinforce it and they see it in action and you've walked the talk, you've actually demonstrated that you actually mean it, you've got their back, then you're starting to build or continuing to build the trust, because now you're showing self-confidence, assertiveness, flexibility, being resilient, open mind. So they see all these things in you when you stand up for them.
Right, exactly. And then by giving them the chance to also take that stance themselves and you help them stand up, that's how you multiply effectiveness. Because now they get, oh wait, I can do this. I can take this chance, and I'm going to have backing to do it. And then they'll do that the next layer, and that empowerment will kind of grow. And that's how you begin to really make a culture shift, if the culture wasn't there already.
Exactly. So this is what I'm dying to ask you. So I love what you're saying, and it's such great advice, and I agree with all of it. But I'm curious what if we've got somebody listening who says, oh my God, I wish I was in an environment like that. Because I know for myself, was in technology my whole career, and there were times when the senior leadership that I work for, they were out for blood. People were always throwing other people under the bus, and, to kind of fall on the sword and say, you know what, it was our team, it was us. Not that we could never do it, but there were certain environments where, everybody was looking for who to blame. And so I'm curious, if someone's listening and they are in that type of environment, what advice would you have for them?
Totally. Well, the first step is, why is the environment like that? Take a look around you. Do you see some points either at your level, below your level, above your level? It's probably above your level typically that is making this happen. One of the places I was at, it was a small startup, and keep in mind, small makes things a little bit easier than large. There was a person in a CTO role who was extremely negative, would lash out at people, would really attack people. It was very, very difficult to actually get work done. It was causing the chief architect to not talk. It was causing developers to be afraid to raise issues. It was causing everyone to kind of, well, I don't want the knife in my back. I'm just going to do my own thing. So we identified person, me, in this case. I had a conversation with the person and started having like, hey, can we talk about what's going on? And it happened over the course of a couple of months to try and figure out, first off, what's going on? Can I make a change? Can I help this person soon? Sometimes it's more than one person, but in this case, again, small startup. Turns out that after a certain period of time, I couldn't. This was beyond my skill set. That's when I went up the next level of the food chain, just in case to the CEO, and we had a long conversation over many, many months about how one person with this type of attitude can change an entire culture, can change an entire way of doing work.
So true.
Exactly. And this is a person who he then tried to work with to try and help bring him out, get him out of that negative space that was causing negativity to flow across everyone else. And because this person was another leader, the exact situation you described, the lashing out, the out for blood, the every mistake was a fatal mistake, even to the point of, well, we didn't get that, so obviously the company is going out of business. So this whole type of negative chain would just feed itself. This person was eventually removed from the company. And then what we saw was almost a week later, it was like, not even a week later, almost a couple of days later, there's like this, wait a minute, I feel okay. And the company was able to recover fairly quickly after that, believe it or not. You saw the entire mindset change.
Your point is so worth emphasizing, because when you're saying one person can change a culture, especially when they're in a senior role.
Exactly.
And, if everybody on the team is working really hard, because we started with how do you create a workplace for your team to thrive? And if people really have a lot of pride in the company culture, but there's one person in a key position whose behavior is not reinforcing the culture, it's actually working against the culture, then I so admire and respect when an executive makes that tough decision to, make a choice, because I've seen that happen myself. And one of the things that's so important about having a culture and a set of values, right? A set of values that the company operates by is to say, these are the behaviors that we feel so strongly about, that's sort of our compass of how we guide our actions, our direction. And if somebody's allowed to be the, what would you call it? The toxic element in the culture, well, then the values kind of go out the window because it's like, wait a minute, is it just on a piece of paper or are we actually going to walk the talk and actually live and breathe what we say we're going to do?
Exactly. And that really comes back to that first bullet point too, the first question about how do you enable your teams to thrive? There's been times I've walked into a situation and realized that there is an individual who probably shouldn't be in that position. Sometimes it's finding them in a position at the company. Sometimes it's helping them grow into that position. But once you kind of remove that, you find the thorn that's sticking in them. You can be amazed at how quickly the culture around that person changes, especially if they're a leader.
Yeah, nice. So I know that you are, given the roles that you've had in engineering and so on, and I know that you are passionate about fostering creativity and innovation and so on. And I'm curious, along the way, there are skeptics who really don't agree with what you or your team are trying to do. They say, Allison, that sounds good, but I'll believe it when I see it. What's your strategy of trying to get buy-in from the skeptics?
That's a really great question. I love that question. And there's several different paths to kind of come into that, turning that skeptic into a booster, if you will. And some of them are things that you do directly, and some of them are things you do indirectly. One thing that I'm pretty proud of is I tend to be fairly transparent. So if someone asks me a question, I will do my best to answer them as truthfully and as honestly as I can, even if I don't know them. So one example of how this mentality came back to help me turn skeptics around was a person at a company. She had just gotten a promotion, and we were meeting at a Women in Technology gathering at the same company. And she said, "Hey, you work here too. Can I ask you a question? This was my promotion. Did they treat me fairly?" And she meant did the salary increase match what I've seen at the company for everyone there? And it did. And I told her that. We had to talk about that, and we talked about experience and all that fun stuff afterwards, and I didn't think much of it. About 8 months later, I'm on a project, and a lot of folks don't believe in it. I mean, we don't believe you can do this. That type of skeptic. And she was on the team, and she's like, "Oh, hey, I remember you." And we had a long talk about the project, her fears, my fears, and we said, "You know what? I trust you. I'll make it work." And she worked with, it was a combination team. She worked with some of the team members who I didn't know as well to help bring them aboard. I worked with others. We made sure that we practiced the say-do ratio. What I said is what I did. And if I couldn't do it, I always gave a why. And for any ask, I gave whys as well, get folks brought into the piece. She was doing the same. I would handle folks who didn't quite know her, didn't quite trust her. She would handle folks who didn't quite know me, didn't quite trust me, but trusted her. So it was bring it up a level. Find the folks who will come along, especially skeptics will trust some of them, work with them, work with the skeptics, because skeptics are going to bring up all the issues that you really should know about that you might have to address or you probably should address. So take their input. You have to have most of the time, for real, the 95% of the skeptics, they have real concerns. Work with them to address it. Make them help you address it. Don't just address it yourself. Get them involved in the process. Once you start seeing that buy-in, that's when things begin to change. And there are a few occasions, under 5%, where the skeptic doesn't turn around, and that's when you have to ask yourself, is the value the person's bringing to the team greater or less than the value of them not being on the team? Back to the initial statement, because sometimes skepticism can lead to negativity. Most of the time, you want to keep them because they bring that healthy dose of reality. But a few times that reality becomes back to that negative philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, such wise advice. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And so I love your strategy of being very proactive at looking who are those key, my words, key stakeholders that you really absolutely need them to buy in. And so, evaluating. And I loved how you partnered with this other woman to kind of divide and conquer. I mean, that was really a brilliant strategy.
It was sheer luck. It really comes down to if you, at the end of the day, treat people like you want to be treated. And I love being involved in things, at least knowing that my voice is heard, make sure everyone else has that feeling. And you'll be amazed at how many folks begin to come around us, especially not just the key stakeholders, but there's always what I call the heart stakeholder. Every team has one or two people who are the heart. They're typically not the best, They may or may not be in leadership, but they're the ones who everyone goes to.
Nice, nice. Well, that made me think of something else I want to ask you, Allison. It's all such good advice. So you're fostering this open environment, very trusting. You want people to feel that they can fail fast and building trust. But what do you do? I'm curious how you've handled situations where somebody on the team just isn't pulling their weight. They're not the heart of the team, but you've given them this autonomy, but now they're just not pulling their weight. How have you handled that?
Totally. That's also a really important piece too, because even with having a very open environment, people are trusting and getting work done, you need to make sure people are still getting the work done. So a couple of pieces. First of all, you want to find out why. If the person is in a new role, are they not getting support of the new role? Are they in over their heads? Do they need help? That's always one of the first steps. Or did something happen? Did a parent die or is a child sick? Those pieces can also come up too. And as you begin to kind of dive in, you'll see that, okay, if that's the case, then provide the right support network for that person. If they're in over their head, then maybe it's like, hey, we might have moved too fast. Let's talk about just pulling these pieces back and easing in. And that sometimes works. Other times, especially if it's someone who's relatively new to the company, they just can't do the work. And this also goes back to that same thing about if you have a negative person, the similar pace, if you have someone who is not pulling their weight on the team, first try and help them. If you can't help them, they're not the right fit, then you see where else can they fit in the team, in the company. If that's still not there, then it's like, well, can they fit someplace else that's not this company? Those are the hardest discussions because they're trying hard. They feel terrible too because they're not succeeding. They know it. The team feels bad and they're trying to cover it. And the team also goes, well, if they're only doing that much, I only have to do that much. So you can slow your environment down too. So the key is work with them quickly to remove that problem. So if they're not succeeding, you try, you help, you can't get them out there, they might have to be taken out of the team.
Right.
You can't be too nice there, but you have to be respectful and honest with what you're trying to do. Yeah.
Your advice is excellent. And from my own experience, I'd say more often than not, somebody wasn't in the right role.
Exactly.
And that if I had to use the 80-20 rule, I'd say 80% of the time they weren't in a role that truly maximized their strengths and talents. And they found themselves in a situation where, it maybe sounded good, but then they got into the role. They're in it, like you said, in over their head for whatever reason, just not performing well, wasn't a good fit. And you're actually doing them I don't want to say a favor, but you're doing the best thing for them long term by saying, you know what, you will be more successful and confident in a different role.
Exactly.
This isn't the right role for you. It's not that they're a bad person. That's usually more rare. So I love your approach to it because it's easy for people to come to a conclusion about someone without all the data and really dig in a little deeper. So I really like your approach a lot.
And I love what you mentioned earlier. One of the pieces I think is really worth saying when you talk about finding the right role. So many times you're going to find that person in the right role. Maybe a developer should be a scrum master, or maybe this QA person really should be in development, or this developer should be in QA. And those switches, I've done all of them in the past. And what I see is a person who was really not feeling good about themselves suddenly realized, hey, I can do this new role. That's awesome. The hardest ones are going from management back to developer, so to speak, because then you have that being a failure. So that goes back to creating that environment to go, no, it's okay. This is a good thing to do. You're still valuable. You're as valuable. In fact, you're more valuable because you're doing great again.
Right. And well, this is the problem. And since, like I said, I've been in technology my whole career, and early days, the only way to really make the big leaps was to become a manager. And so not every company has as many opportunities depending on what role you're in. So then you find all these people who are technically brilliant thinking, well, if I want a promotion and I want more money, well, I guess I'm going to have to go for the management job. But honestly, that's not what they really wanted. So I always challenge people. So through the years, I'll challenge people if they say, oh, I want to be the director of such and such. I'll say, well, let's talk about that. What exactly do you want? Why would you want to be in the role? What will you be doing every day? How does it play to your strengths? And when you really peel back the layers, it's the only path that they see for advance, but they don't really want it.
Exactly. I love the way you stated that. You just nailed it.
So and that's why, for the engineering function, someone like yourself who has both the expertise and the people skills to lead an organization is fascinating to me because I'll admit most of my career in working with you're either technically brilliant, and there are people who can certainly, like yourself, be great leaders. But I've just seen too many people find themselves in a leadership role. Then they want to close the door and work on the juicy stuff. But all the people issues around, they don't want to deal with those because they'd really rather be working with the technology.
Exactly. And that's why I love companies like Carbon Black that have a technical path. And it's also a good point for me to just bring back to that first response where I talk about jumping in and helping. When I do talk about jumping and helping as a leader, it doesn't mean going in my case, doing software development, because I'll be a bottleneck then and I won't be doing my job. But there's so many things around the team that you can do to help, whether it's helping with prioritization of work, whether it's helping clean up backlogs, whether it's helping bring food, whether it's helping get IT and security together so you can get these pieces lined up, whether it's getting new laptops or getting a way to get virtual machines set up very easily. That's what I mean by jumping in, sleeves rolled up.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you clarified that. That didn't even occur to me that you meant jump in and actually do the work. But I love what your point, because what I hear most often, and I don't necessarily hear this at Carbon Black, but there's so much pressure to meet the release deadlines, get the next release out, meet this client commitment and so on, that it can often feel, depending on your process, like changing priorities, conflict in priorities. Everybody wants something, and you in engineering are at that intersection point of trying to please so many different groups, and you're up against these, tight schedules. And so having a manager, a leader who can run interference, make the tough decisions, step in, that just is so valuable to the team.
And that's how you go back to gaining trust right there. Everything's interconnected that way.
Right. And so I have to tell you, I am just so fascinated with the fact that you've got an advanced degree in artificial intelligence. I'm enormously interested. And I know we don't have time to dig in today, but I was like really, really curious how that has helped you as a leader in understanding, because you're an excellent leader. You were the first person that was recommended for me to speak with. And so how has that artificial intelligence expertise, how does that help you as a leader when you're actually dealing with, your team? You've got kind of an inside track. You've got to, wait a minute, you have an unfair advantage. That's what I wanted to say.
Well, it really does come down to wanting to understand how the brain works and how decisions are made. But it also, funny enough, one of the pieces that really kind of helped me with people is that even if you think you're being clear with your training, with your words, with your data, never ever underestimate your own inability to get a point across. I mean, it's there's I think it was a Thomas Pynchon book this is about, and there's the book review was completely different in meaning from what the author thought the book should say. And the comment was, never trust an author to tell you what a book means. It is. And I look at that from when I talk to folks is like, if I'm saying something, there's so many ways to misinterpret it, so many ways to hear words you want to hear, and my way as well. So one of the things that I learned from learning about machine learning, artificial intelligence, was to restate problems and ask questions different ways to try and hone in on what the actual meat is. And one of the best examples from AI, they're trying to build a Mars lander that could be self-navigating. And they put it on this old flat test bed surface out on some lake bed, and the machine just sat there. The rover sat there. It wasn't moving. Everything was lit up. Computer was pegged. It was doing lots of processing. And what they realized was that they had done all the training around how to move, but they had never trained it to start moving. So they had this very small one, and then another one with that where they did training on pictures-defined tanks. The data, they trained it. Yeah, it was great. And then they tried a second set of data. It missed every tank. Turned out, instead of training it on the tank, they trained it on telling night and day in a photo. Because every photo of a tank with the training data was daylight, and every photo without a tank was nighttime for the training data. So it really goes down to, you got to think about how you communicate. Exactly.
That
data
is
matters.
so interesting.
And understanding the data matters more.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love that. And so, you know what I'm thinking of, because like I said, you're right in that intersection of innovation and creating the products and solutions and services for your company. And I'm curious, given the pressure that's on your organization, you're trying to create a workplace for your team to thrive. What's been your most favorite activity that was super fun and is sort of one of your all-time favorites?
Activity as in getting folks out of their own head?
Yeah, with the team.
Probably the most fun I think we've had. Well, most fun I've had. I do swear a lot.
So you've been controlling yourself on this podcast.
I've been controlling myself on this podcast, yes. And what I did was I put a swear jar down and told my team that when it's filled up, I will buy pizza for everyone on the team. So it became a game, basically. The team trying to get me to swear, not hard. and me going out and buying pizza. And we also had some beer and wine at Carbon Black because we're progressive. And we had pizza and some drinks. And we had some nice jokes about me and my swearing. And we're going to do it again because I'm still trying to learn a lesson. But it also allows the team to kind of have a little fun in a way that's not always things you do. So it was a really just kind of nice way to like little things here and there, like a little ribbing here, a little joking here, and it can really break the tension. So we were having a tense meeting. I might do something and then I can go, oh my God, well, there's another like 4 business cards in the swear jar, so I got to go buy pizza. Mm-hmm. But so that was one of the things like I just started doing that here. I really, really like that little thing. It really helps diffuse situations. And in a similar vein, I love humor. So when we're in meetings, I know we're going to be tense. I have this blue stuffed virus about the size of a large softball that I say it's the virus of negativity. If someone's negative, throw it at them. They hold it till someone else is negative. They throw it at them. So these are they're not like events. They're not things you do, but they're just ways of breaking what could be a very tense situation and resetting it to someplace that's not bad. It's breaking the cycle. Those are the type of events that really make me happy.
Well, and what I love, Allison, about those examples, and thank you for sharing them. I love them. So what I love about it is some of the events or activities, I should say, that are really memorable to me, they took a lot of effort to plan them and organize them and get 100 people involved in, or a big group. And it was, and people to get out of the office. And, even though they were fabulous, it was a lot of effort. So what I love is what are those simple, and I wasn't necessarily the person doing all the organizing, but yet we were all part of it, right? And so, and getting permission, we need to leave the office for 2 hours, whatever. Cause we've done, we used to do scavenger hunt and, paintball and, different things. So what I love is having it be part of just that workplace every day, simple things that make it part of the culture of your team and not a one-time event where, we're going to wait months before we go out and have any fun.
We do have fun too. I mean, if folks have not taken their teams to Bodeborg out in Malden, that's a great way to have teams go out, get in smaller groups, rotate the groups around, and just try and solve problems together. Those are also fun too. But to your point, that's every couple of months or every 6 months or once a year. You want to build the fun in other ways too. They're all important. They're all necessary.
Yeah. Allison, what was the place you mentioned in Malden? What is it?
It's called Bodeborg, Bodaborg. It's like Escape the Room in downtown Boston. It's about 26 different rooms. Each room has a puzzle you have to solve to get out, to escape.
Oh my God, I've never heard of it.
It's awesome. And if you fail, you have to restart again. So you can have a whole bunch of we had 40-ish people go down one day for a half day. We left like around 11 a.m. We had lunch there. We went into teams of 5, maximum people you can have to solve the puzzle. We'd rotate people around the teams to break the teams up a little bit. It's physical, it's mental, and there was food, so it was perfect.
Oh my God, that sounds fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing that because we were always on the lookout for activities, and there's just a whole range of activities that are fun, but that I have never heard of. So thank you for sharing that. I love that.
Sure.
The last question I really wanted to ask you is, given your own personal career, your experience, and where you are now, is there anything that you'd want to share around sort of the lessons you wish you'd learned earlier in your career?
And it runs back to the theme we kind of had going through this too, is that if you can see that negative person on the team, don't put up with it. Find a way to make that stop. Help that person, help your company, help your team. Because at the end of the day, I wish I knew that early on, because my first job out of school, I had someone like that, and I just lived with it instead of actually trying to make it better.
Great advice. Yeah, I know. I'm thinking of people right now. Somebody's face just, right out of college just popped into my head from like 40 years ago. If anybody listening, Allison, would like to, talk to you, follow up on something, they love to connect with you, what is the best way to connect with you?
Sure. LinkedIn, just look for my name, is great. You can also catch me on Twitter under A. Perkel. And if you care to comment on photos, you can find me under Instagram, also A. Perkel.
A. Perkel, great. Excellent. Thank you so much. So thank you, Allison. And I just want to, for anyone listening to this episode, if you found this valuable, be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you can receive the weekly episodes. You can either go to iTunes or thesuccesstalkshow.com and click on subscribe. So I want to thank you for listening and have a great day. Thanks, Allison.
Thank you too. Have a wonderful day.